What if the epicness that we sometimes spend our entire lifetime searching for exists not in spite of the boulders, but thanks to the boulder version of you, that these boulders inspire you to become? Often, when we least expect it, life thrusts us into the role of the reluctant shiro or hero in our own story. How we respond in those moments can be the difference between thriving or just surviving. We believe that our story will be determined by how we dare to answer one burning question: how to choose to live. Join us as we explore the mindset shifts, innovative strategies, and captivating stories from my own life experience and those of my truly epic guests. So let's get this started. Welcome to a super special bonus episode of the How to Choose to Live podcast. And why is it super special, or why is it bonus? Well, I will share with you that it is bonus because it's a concept that the most epic side chick in the world and I have been mulling over for a long time, at least a year, thinking, wouldn't it be amazing to be able to almost like put someone in the position of being a fly on the wall when you know that they have a lot of the same questions, and that just a few hints of actual guidance that are a little bit more specific than what you may normally hear in some of the episodes. These are like real questions. And the reason why it is so special is because this is my heart chick, right? This woman that I'm about to introduce you to is so special. She came to me. She discovered me years ago, and I fell in love with her instantly. At first, as her coach, and she was someone who just asked absolutely the best questions, dove in 1,000%. She has come to our breakthrough experiences that we have at certain times during the year. She's been bold when she felt like she'd probably rather be fearful. She's just an amazing woman that has evolved into formally being the epic side chick that she is today. So, what we thought we would do is today, Sandy's going to kind of play the role, although we're all human beings, we all have these constant questions, of really asking some very specific questions and giving me the opportunity to kind of respond almost as if you are having the opportunity to listen in on a coaching session. So these may be questions that you've asked at some point in your own life, or they may be questions that you haven't thought to ask that would maybe somehow clean something up for you. But what we're pretty sure is that you're going to take a breath at the end of this and go, oh my gosh, I was meant to hear this. And so that really is our mission, is to help you on this amazing quest to unleash the most epic version of you and to get a little more clarity on how to choose to live. So, allow me to welcome one of the most special human beings in the world who does put the kind into humankind, my Wonder Woman, Sandy, otherwise known as Queen Sandy. Woohoo!
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. Thank you. That was amazing. Thank you.
Well, it's just been an honor knowing you and watching you grow and watching you expand. So, before we dive into the question today, one thing that I'd love for you to just little bird's eye version share is, as you probably know, one of the through lines, the ongoing theme is that living your most epic life discovering, unleashing, nurturing the most epic version of yourself. One isn't like a diploma that goes on the wall. You don't like check everything off, do all the subjects, you get an A and you're done. But it also isn't intended to be a solo sport. It's something
Mhm.
that you go further faster when you have your coaches, have your mentors, and have the right people giving the insights to the right questions. Would you share a little bit of what you have experienced as far as maybe a time in your life when you were trying to figure things out on your own, maybe even beating yourself up for not being able to figure out? And then
Yeah.
how has it impacted your life deciding to do it a little bit differently and turn it more into Team Sandy?
No, I think that's a wonderful question. And I tend to be, and I think a lot of us tend to be very contemplative. We will analyze, go over, what we've done and things that maybe we could do better. And one of the things that I have very much appreciated through coaching or just having others to speak with is you get a different perspective on things. Sometimes you're going straight forward, going right down a line, and you're stuck in this rut, and you don't even realize that there's a way to get out of that with just somebody else giving you a different thought, a different way of viewing it. Um, I think that's actually pivotal for us in moving forward in our lives is having that ability to hear other perspectives and learn from them.
And let me ask you, did you find that I know you have gotten to the point where you're really adept, where you have started to kind of reprogram some parts of your mind so that
Mhm.
where maybe you used to go automatically, now you kind of have gotten the capacity to kind of stop yourself and look at things a little bit differently. When you had the experience of having, for example, being in one of our sessions, and I was able to reflect back to you, Sandy, what I feel like I'm hearing when you say that is, or can I play with you on this and maybe
Yes.
introduce a slightly different idea that wasn't accessible to you at that time?
Hmm.
When you did that, one, did it speed up you kind of getting beyond the speed bumps? And two, over time, like consistently doing this, did it get to the point where you could actually kind of find yourself starting to feel that feeling and then having more and more capacity to learn how to self-soothe or shift yourself
Hmm.
out of it?
Hmm. Uh, well, I know one of the first things that, and it took me a few times of us discussing it before I really comprehended it, and that was limiting beliefs. That
Hmm.
was such an epiphany to me, but it took me a little bit of time to really grasp the whole concept of it. And it was just astounding to me. I couldn't understand why nobody else had talked about this and why nobody else wasn't shouting this from the rooftops that it's just our beliefs that are stopping us from moving forward. And I know oftentimes I actually, we've talked about Skylar, and she is actually one of my inspirations. Whenever I'm struggling with something or I'm starting to limit myself, I think about all the success that she's had and things that she's gotten through, and it pushes me through. And we've often talked about that. And I think another thing is the habit that needs to be formulated. So often I will find that if I haven't spent as much time on, I guess, focusing on a way of thinking, it's very easy to lose that and having to come back to it and realizing that it's a habit that we have to do. And that's one of the things that I so appreciate having with you is I know every time I come on, there have been times I've come on and I've been like, oh, I don't know, Meredith, I'm having a tough day. I've got a headache. I'm just not gonna, not all with it today. And just your energy, first of all, brings my energy up. And then just what we end up talking about, I can say 10 times out of 10, I have left feeling so much better, enthusiastic, like ready to go, gung ho. And it's a very important thing. And I hope that answered your question for you.
I think it does. And I think one thing that you're speaking to also is that every single day we are hit with a barrage of experiences, other people's energy, other
Yes.
people's will, um,
Yes.
other people's version of this thing called life, the story around it. And so we're intersecting with a lot of other hero and shero stories. And sometimes, if we have not gotten to the place where we realize the deliberate, intentional role that
Hmm.
we have freedom of choice. We can be on autopilot the majority of our lives, and whichever the way the waves toss us, we end up. Or
Hmm.
the other option, which ultimately ends up being, in my biased opinion, the more enriching experience, empowering experience, is to realize that we get a say in our
Hmm.
own story. And yet, it is a lot of these systems, these practice, to your point, habits that we
Hmm.
teach ourselves. We have to deliberately commit to learning them because of that barrage. And because the foundation from when we were young, when we formed our impression, can be so strong. And
Oh,
if
yeah.
the majority of the influences, the external influences, push, push, push against us, that's why it can be so important, the choice you make of what you listen to, what you let in, and who you intersect with, and the power that you give yourself. And I would even say the responsibility that you're willing to take on for your own inner narrative, and feeling that you have a right to say that thought, you don't get to have traction within me,
Absolutely.
right? And
Well, and
and
it's a word that I used just a couple of minutes ago is the example that I often think of is the rut. And water
yes,
always goes to that deepest rut. It doesn't mean that that's the only way it goes. And you have to work to focus it and build other avenues for that water to flow. Those thoughts always are going to go that way that you've had that foundation previously until you redirect those thoughts like that water to make a new one that's better for you.
I love that metaphor, and I also love that because it's, the water is so fluid, and the direction of the water, the flow of the water, the width of the river can change over
Mm-hmm.
time, and the version of ourselves, our that version is going to have the potential to expand or contract over time. And a lot of it depends on what we choose to focus on, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then what we choose to make that focus mean. So I love what you've shared. Now let's show those of you who are playing with us here and so generous with your time to listen to this, a little bit about what we're talking about. Sandy brought a question today that she has seen show up. I mean, I'll pass it off to you. Share for us the inspiration for this question that you thought would be insightful today.
Yeah. So as I said, one of the things I tend to do is I love to analyze things and review them and look at different things. And as I've been doing this, obviously searching and looking for those better avenues to go down, I've been coming up against just things that I've allowed to happen in the past, or things that I didn't know better to do better type thing. But how can you, when you, once you recognize them, that's obviously the first part, but then how to forgive yourself for them? Because I know that we can be very self-critical, and how can we forgive ourselves for the mistakes that we've made, or not even mistakes, but because I don't even know, as we've talked about, I do believe things happen for us to go different directions. But how do you, it's kind of more the either actions you've taken or the things that you've allowed to happen, as I said. How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, see, I mean, this is such a powerful question, and I feel like there's so many dimensions to this question. First and foremost, I think putting into the spotlight before we even ask can I forgive myself for having done that, and that crunch that we can feel for decades after, because functionally, remember, our minds, we're reliving it over and
Mhm.
over again. It's kind of irrelevant what calendar year it happened when we still feel the impact for it. But I think before we ask, even, can I forgive myself? It's being bold enough to go even one layer deeper. What does it say about the way I'm still, put it in parentheses, still defining myself if I believe that I am someone who the person themselves needs forgiveness, not an action that I wish perhaps I'd made a different choice, but I'm saying no. I am someone who is shame. I am worthy of shame. I am
Mhm.
worthy of guilt. There is a flaw within me that the whole world may not be able to see, but I frickin' see it every time I look in that mirror. And as long as that is the core of who we believe ourselves to be, i.e., this wretched, flawed individual, then all the hows do I forgive myself, all the little coping skills are going to be just that, a band-aid for a wound that is like a flesh-eating virus. It will not be healed with a band-aid. So that's part one.
Mhm.
And the other part that's very similar to that, I think, is how are we defining the life experience, this experience that we call life? Are we once again getting lured into this weird impression that there's such a thing as perfection? Or do we honor this majestic experience that is built in with dualities? And just as we have explored, we were talking about it a moment ago, how exhilarating it can be to have a fantastic mentor
Mhm.
by nature, even with the most fantastic mentors in the world. There's often a moment where we go, I know they did it that way, but that's not really me. I'm not really wired that way. I think I'm going to take that system or that way of doing it, and I'm going to change just this one thing. I mean, how harmless is that got to be, right? And so
Mhm.
before we know it, there's one piece of the mentor's original plan or strategy in place, and everything else has been kind of contorted and distorted so that nothing changes. And we keep going, ugh, you see, it didn't work, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, now let's take the experience of the anti-mentors in our lives, the people who repulse us, who are so freaking painful that we can't distract ourselves and look the other way. We have to assess it and clearly, no ambivalence, we say, I do not want that.
Right.
Those are the moments when we have the greatest shot. Again, even then, it's not guaranteed. That's why sometimes we live these anti-mentor experiences over and over and over again and come to the conclusion that that's just the way life is. It's just filled with all these anti-mentor experiences. But we have the greatest shot if we are willing to look at them as kind of the genius teachers that they also can be, meaning, okay, if clarity is my power, you got me clear. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So, what questions do I need to let go of? Stop asking. What questions do I need to start asking? And how do I need to look at this moment differently? And this is something that you and I have talked about a lot that really ties into your question so brilliantly. And it's that we, in my humble opinion and experience, get into this habit of assessing and assuming that whatever happened in our past are really the elements that we're working in or destined to relive over and over again, becomes the trend of not only our future, but this very moment right here.
Mm-hmm.
Like if that happened back then,
Right.
what's the use, right? What's the use? And as you know, you brought up Skylar, medical precedent. That's one of the reasons why we were called by these doctors who'd worked on thousands of cases said,
Mm-hmm.
you guys are the miracle family. And it's not just the medical precedent that goes back thousands of years that you've completely bucked. It is that inner game sort of thing. And what I learned from that boulder and from all the other boulders that became my beloved anti-mentors over and over again in my own life is that, again, it's not in spite of these things. It's that we are not here to live the past over and over again. We're not even here to fix it. We are here to use that as data, clues, evidence of either what works, what doesn't work, and what we might choose to do differently. Because I don't care how much evidence you have not lived and experienced this moment ever before.
Right.
And if a freaking medical precedent that goes back thousands of years can not stand, then what else? What can we possibly be hoping to see that is
Mm-hmm.
more miraculous than something along the lines as that, at least as far as most human beings and their lives are concerned? So, to get back to your question, how do I forgive myself? Well, first of all, I would say that the first thing is to step back and say, okay, how am I going to define myself, even if it's only beginning this moment? Even if that was my trend in the past, I live in this breathtaking world of duality.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I learn to make a conclusion that is going to be epic, empowering, align me with my purpose, be innovative, and allow me to collaborate with this gorgeous world that I have been given the opportunity to play in, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter how long it quote unquote takes me to get there because this is the only moment that is of any relevance to me right now. How richly am I living this? So if I am stepping into this moment saying all of those things, all of the choices that maybe, okay, maybe I wish I might have made a different choice. However, let's look at the magic at play here. Thanks to the intensity of my reaction to those experiences, it prompted me to do this or to
Hmm.
not do that or to ask this question or to be have a little bit more grit and determination right now when I am facing something that seems like this again. It gives me the fuel not to give up the next time I bump up against something that wants to throw me back into a habit that I know now clearly will lead to some emotions that, yeah, I can admit they don't feel good.
Right.
So the question becomes if someone, for example, for whatever reason, had horrible trauma, abuse in their life, and they go and they become an addict and they get out there and they do all sorts of things that we would label horrible things. And yet one morning they wake up and they're about as low as can be. And they say, enough, time out. And they take that moment to go out and do whatever needs to be done to literally clean up their life. And they go on to inspire thousands of people. Is their life a bad thing? Even
Right.
though they might have had some choices that had they not had, those were their boulders. Had they not had those, they wouldn't have the desire, the fortitude, the unique set of ingredients that set them up and them alone to be the perfect hero or shero in their version of their story. And they have the choice, the option to take all those ingredients and they can burn the cake or they can make something that's the most delectable, delightful thing you've ever tasted.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense, actually. Yeah.
And so it's all, in my humble opinion, it's not so much about saying in order to feel good about who I am, I have to magically and mysteriously erase that. Because forgiveness is not erasing something. And this is why sometimes it can be hard intellectually, emotionally to feel like I can forgive something or someone who did something that hurt me deeply because it feels almost like we're letting them off the hook. And it also feels like if I don't constantly poke myself, that I might forget how painful that was and allow that to happen again. Or to feel like somehow, God forbid, that what they did was justified and benefited me, that I should feel thankful to them. That's not fair. That's not right. What they did was horrible. When it really isn't about them, it's about you and your relationship with you and your relationship with this amazing experience that we call life.
Hmm.
And it's a duality. Therefore, it's not the goal, the winning goal is not always the W, right? And I mean, and you've heard the metaphor over and over again. Even people who end up in the Hall of Fame, they end up failing two-thirds of the time,
Yep.
right? And those are the Hall of Famers. And to add another layer to it, virtually none of those Hall of Famers would be Hall of Famers if they didn't have team and they didn't have a coach. And you never get to the point where I mean, my gosh, where they go, oh God, these guys are so good. They're the best of the best. Let's save ourselves a lot of money and let's just fire the coaching team. I mean, my God, they haven't figured it out by now. They're
Hmm.
figure it out. And they go on, these individuals, to evolve into a version of themselves that without their team and without their coach and without that 2/3% failure,
Hmm.
they wouldn't be out there surprising and delighting this amazing crowd, right?
It's amazing to me because just in this conversation, we've touched upon the things that we talked about at the very beginning, in the fact that um, you know, when I was thinking about this question and the trying to look back and forgive myself for whatever it was, is I realized that that was trying to catch myself from failing again. And for me, the limiting belief of, oh my gosh, I can't fail, but then remembering and the fact that there have been so many people who have quote unquote failed, but are that was the building blocks to get them to the next step. So it's not really a failure. So we've touched upon like several of the things we just initially spoke about at the very beginning, which is what I always, it's it always cracks me up in my mind when we're talking because I'll come and I'll be like, this okay, this is what I've got. And then halfway through what you're saying, I'm like, yep, I know we talked about that before. Yep, yep, okay. All right, yep, I know that one. That's right. I forgot that. So that's why it's brilliant to have the conversation.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to point out to those of you who are maybe absorbing and listening to this conversation, I want you to also notice the energy, the aura around Sandy when she was embodying this question and the heaviness of the question and almost the guilt and the shame when you presented the
Mm-hmm,
question. I mean, you're so good at embodying this that you could see the thickness, the tangles, the angst, the pain. And as more and more of this realized that this was the harmony within you, the tone of your voice goes up, the lightness, the intangibles. Yeah, that beautiful smile that is so you, Sandy. I mean, it's really, this question, of course, is brilliant. And yet, how many of us in the dark of night or a fleeting moment where something reminds us of that dreaded thing, that dreaded time, where we see a version of ourselves that's long gone and that sometimes can make us forget who we now not only are, but have the capacity to step out into the world being. And as much as we would never want to live that again, that is part of the glue, the findings of the sparklies, right? The
mm-hmm,
sparklies, it has to have something holding the diamond in place. And that's where those and boy, if you took the diamond out and you pressed it against your skin, it would probably pierce it. So it's that culmination of that. So if you are listening to this and thinking about this, I would really encourage you, even if there's a thought that kind of parallels this, notice how we didn't, the answer wasn't necessarily in, okay, well, now you've got to have self-care. It wasn't the how, it isn't the coping, it isn't necessarily the obvious action at first. It's saying, huh, where's the clue here? Why do I feel like I need forgiving? What is that saying? What does that tell me about my focus? The fact that I chose that word, forgive. What's the invisible story around that word? And when do we tend to use that word? What does it imply about the characters in that story? Right. And then that third element, the envisioning, the imagination. When I say, how do I forgive myself for that? What is the story that my mind is envisioning, not only about that, but to your point just now, going forward?
Right.
I say this because I'm dreadfully afraid that in spite of everything that I have learned and that I am learning, that I am the one who is destined to get caught in the infinite repeat, that I will never be able to be the person who can look in the mirror and say, the beauty that I see in you is, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you guys, you can see why Sandy is just such a brilliant embodiment of a lot of the questions. It's that analytical part of your mind, Sandy, that is just so amazing because whether it's someone who knows they have this question or someone who knows they have this question but has been too embarrassed to ask those kind of questions, or someone who this has been their question but they haven't known it,
Hmm.
we are all part of these human spirits having a human being experience. And it's a better experience when one, we agreed to do it in harmony together, and two, with one of our primary goals, if not our only goal as we step out, is that sweet spot between how do I step out as that epic version of myself and how do I gauge that on whether I'm feeling like I'm fully alive right now in this experience. And to be fully alive doesn't necessarily mean I'm joyous all the time. It means that I'm getting to know this quirky, brilliant, perfectly imperfect version of a human being that I and you know as me. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So if you're watching this, I hope that this has been of value to you as much as Sandy and I love this. It's both of our passions in a different but totally aligned and harmonic sort of ways. Um, sh Again, this will be something that we will share with you on a more regular basis because I think it is a complement to some of the other episodes that we have, and we would encourage you to, of course, listen into Sandy's questions, but also to encourage you to bring your own, because I think that what you'll find is that our objective here is not to spew out the same old coping skills that are all over the internet. And there are a lot out of there, but it's really learning how to implement a lot of those really excellent coping skill ideas, but how do you make them part of who you are so that they really sink in and they can point to the important things even at a few levels deeper so that you're not always feeling like you need those coping skills 24/7 so that you can go out there and feel like you're truly living. So, Sandy, darling, this will be the first of many, many, many opportunities that we will have to share. If you have one thing about boldness, being bold enough to ask yourself some uncomfortable questions and to be able to step up and say, I'm going to be bold enough to ask, what would you share about to the listener about how important it really is to be willing to ask yourself some questions, even when the questions feel uncomfortable?
Well, I think just being honest with yourself, because that's if you're not honest with yourself, then you're not going to, well, you're not doing yourself any favors. And sometimes the hard questions hurt, but that makes them sometimes even more important to be asked. But I think just asking them and finding somebody that, like you, somebody that is you can trust with those questions, that can give you feedback and perspectives that can be different and can help you with your endeavors to live a better life.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, Sandy, yay! Thanks for being bold enough to hop on here and to share this with all of you. We definitely are fixated on helping you just learn about language. To figure out what it means for you to unleash that epic version of yourself and what it looks like to answer your own version of that question, how to choose to live. So, uh, stay tuned after this. I will have another bonus tip to actually put this into action. Plus, as we go forward, sneak peek, something fun to look forward to. Sandy, being the analytical, amazing, creative dynamo that she is, has come up with some of these really cool sort of exercises and tables and graphs to be able to track your progress as you actually step forward. So we'll be sharing some of those as bonuses. And of course, any questions that you have, we would love to hear them. So, Sandy, until the next time that we do this or in between, you are just amazing. And it has been so incredible
Thank
to
you.
be here.
It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Yay! All right, guys, see you on the How to Choose to Live podcast next episode. And of course, stay tuned for those bonus tips. Booyah! Woohoo! I so hope that you have enjoyed this little fly on the wall side door coaching session as much as Sandy and I have enjoyed it. So, the good news is that we are going to be back really soon with yet another question where we're really going to be honing into some of those limiting beliefs and blind spots that we all have. Because let's face it, by the very nature, they would not be limiting beliefs or blind spots if we could figure them out on our own, right? And like we mentioned in the actual podcast, that there's tons of information out there. It's not a shortage of information or ideas about coping skills. Where we tend to trip up is seeing sometimes where we need them also, as you saw in this episode, uh, really figuring out what is the real question that can give me my breakthrough. So it's really that implementation piece. So if you're not working directly with me, with us, the next best thing is really to listen in and see how we implement them and look for the patterns and look for the questions, kind of the invisible questions, the invisible stories, the things between the line, so that you can start approaching your own questions maybe in a slightly different way. So maybe, just maybe, some of those questions will start to shift for you. So today's bonus tip is to look at some aspects of your own life, perhaps some experiences or maybe choices you've made, maybe people in your life that you've really had a tough time forgiving. And take a look at that and start applying one, what are you assuming about that experience that's not necessarily true? Meaning, can you find the aspects where you are thankful, not letting these experiences or people off the hook, but thankful for the match, the light, the flame, the fire that it ignited in you, and thankful for the way you have ended up processing it, the who that you have become, thanks to the way that you responded, even when at first it may have seemed like you could never give up. So take a moment to journal about it. If you need a little bit more help, I would suggest picking up a copy of 100 Days of Epic, because forgiveness is one of the things that we really talk about in the focus section. What are you focusing on? What is the presence of what you're focusing on, and what are you making that mean? And we dive into it a little bit more deeply, even. And the 100 Days of Epic is exactly what it seems. It's almost like a guide, a manual. If you were committed to being able to emerge into your world as the most epic version of yourself in just 100 days, what tiny action steps could you take each and every single day to move the needle just by even 1% every single day? So, forgiving yourself, other experience, and trusting yourself enough to forgive. Meaning, do I trust myself that if I forgive that experience, forgive that person, forgive me, that it doesn't mean that I'm going to be letting down my armor and allowing for this to happen again. So, thank you again for tuning into the How to Choose to Live podcast. Keep your eye open for these epic little mini coaching sessions. And if you have a question, of course, leave it in the comments and we will play with that question as well. And of course, as always, please share this with someone who you think just might benefit from knowing about this podcast. And until our next episode, go out there and be someone who's epic. See you next time.